Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Imprint Explained. And today we are back and we're talking about the National Education Policy 2020. So, before we start, let's look at the key features of the education policy. So the first thing we're doing, we're increasing the public spending on education by states and center, and this is supposed to be raised to 6% of GDP. Now, obviously, this is visionary, but as I always say, whenever something like this happens, when this huge number is given by the government, I say, show me the money, because actually 6% GDP is too large a number to be given to education. But let's hope for the best. Okay. Now, next thing. Then the government has this interesting thought process that they would like to rename things. So the 1986 the Ministry of Education was renamed into HRD, and Narasimha Rao became the first HRD minister. Now this has again been renamed back. The most interesting one, I would say, in these the first 3 points is the separate technology unit to develop digital education resources. This is the need of the hour, and I obviously congratulate the minister, right, that you have done this, and I think it's a wonderful thing you have done. Now, what other things they're looking into? Now, school education is something. Briefly, let's go into that. So it's talking about universalization from class 3 to class 10th by 2030. Now, this is wonderful. Uh, the mission to ensure literacy and numeracy skills by 2025. Now, this is the biggest question mark in this education policy, if I think about it. Then the mother tongue as a medium of instruction, again debatable whether you would like to have something like that. One of the articles in the Hindu and the Indian Express criticizes this. New curriculum to include 21st century like coding skills, vocational, wonderful, I would say again. But this there is some caveats attached with this. We'll talk about that in the video. Then board exams to be easier redesigned. I think the board exams are enough of a joke now. 95% seems not even 80% during our maybe 20 years down the time during our times. We have a person for the first time getting 600 out of 600. What kind of joke was that? Right, but that is what these people have done to our education system. Now these people who have got 95%, 99% will take UPSC, will take CAT, will not even score 50% marks. That is what's going to be, unless you're planning to dilute that as well. That's another thing. Now, higher education, new umbrella regulator. Now, how does it work out? Whether it will allow for more privatization, whether it is just giving a free hand, what it's doing, we'll think about that. Flexible, holistic, multidisciplinary UG. Now, this is a wonderful thing. We'll talk about this more. There's no MPhil, and then college affiliate system to be phased out in 15 years now. So maybe a kind of deregulation and maybe more and more foreign players coming in. So this is a brief idea about what the national education policy is. We're going to talk about this a little more. So the first article, we're going to talk about using the various articles. The first article is from the Indian Express, and it says reading news education policy. Okay, so we'll talk about this. So what does it say? It says, first question it says is, what does NAP serve, right? So it's a comprehensive framework to guide the development of education in the country. Now it started, why? Because Congress MP Siddheshwar Prasad criticized the then government, this is in 1964, for lacking a vision and philosophy for education, right? So that, if you think about in our national education policy, they, there's no lack of philosophy definitely in this one. A lot of people have been quoted. So if you start reading it, right? So it talks about the rich heritage of ancient and eternal Indian knowledge has been a guiding light for this policy. There's the pursuit of gyan, wisdom, that's a pragya. Truth, Satya was always considered in Indian thought and philosophy as the highest goal. The aim of education in ancient India was not just the acquisition of knowledge as preparation for the world or life or beyond, but for complete realization and liberation of the soul. And it talks about the world-class institutions we had in ancient India, like Takshila, Nalanda, Vikramshila, Vallabhi, etc. And it talks about the various scholars we had: Charaka, Sushruta, Aryabhatta, Bhaskaracharya, Brahmagupta, Chanakya, Chakrapani Datta, Madhava, Panani, Patanjali, Nagarjuna, and so on, right? Gargi, Thiruvurla, he talks about everybody. If you read this, so that's very interesting if you go through this policy. Now, what happened then? So now coming back. Right, the 17-member Education Commission was then headed by UGC chairperson D.S. Kothari, and it basically drafted one coordinated policy on education, and the parliament passed this in 1968. Now, after that, in 1986, under Rajiv Gandhi, right, and Indira Gandhi, if you think about it. So 1968, Indira Gandhi, and 1986, Rajiv Gandhi, we had the first two policies. Now, the NEP of 86 was revised in 1982, and then the NEP, this is the NEP after 34 years. So it's been a long time coming. Why is that we don't have a policy, let's say, for each 10 years, each decade? It's debatable. I think Niti Aayog needs to do this. I feel that every decade, right? So maybe in 2020 we started. So in 2030, maybe even earlier than that, because big data, AI, etc., are going to change the way education is. So I would say that we would need another education policy in 5 years, if nothing more. So what are the key takeaways? Just to go through that. So it replaces the UGC and the AICTC with the Higher Education Commission of India, right? So this is there. It proposes to include opening up of Indian higher education to foreign universities. Whether they'll be interested, we'll talk about that. It talks about reintroduction of the 4-year multidisciplinary bachelor program. It says that, okay, if you're 1 year, 2 year, so 1 year program, if you do after 12th, you get a certificate. 2 year, you get a diploma, right? If you do a 3 year, you get a bachelor's. And if you get a 4 year, you could do bachelor's with research. So this is a very good idea. I would say this is one of the most, the unique ideas in this policy, and I think very good one. So this flexibility, right, to offer different designs for master's program, the discontinuation MPhil program, it says that the UC chairman does talk about this, and a foundation, setting up a national research foundation. So it also says we propose to phase out all institutions offering single streams, and all universities and colleges must aim to become multidisciplinary 2040. Now, this is highly debatable. We have colleges of excellence, or right, if you think about IIMs, if you take IITs, are you going to make IIMs offer other courses, multidisciplinary? What do you mean by that, right? Management itself is multidisciplinary if you think about it. What about IITs? Would you make them offer BA courses as well? Does the existing infrastructure allow for such an expansion? Huge, I think huge debates can be done about this. Now, what are the key takeaways? Obviously there is one area which we haven't talked about. So it says on school education. So the policy focuses on overhauling the curriculum, easier board exams, reduction in syllabus to retain core essential, and thrust on experimental learning and critical thinking. It does talk about that, but the most interesting thing, obviously, is the target for literacy, that is foundational literacy and numeracy, right? And talks about how do we stop dropout rate. So that I would say I would like to compliment the government on that. Now, it says that previously we used to have something like this. We used to have 10 years of education from 6th to 10th, and this is the Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan, right? And then you had another 2 years of 16 to 18. Now, what it says is that we'll have a foundational stage from class, from ages 3 to 8. So it basically talks about the fact that from ages 3 to 6, it is perhaps the most important times in the life of a student. So it says early childhood care and education, foundation of learning. It says over 85% of the child's cumulative brain development occurs prior to the age of 6. And it indicates critical importance of this time. So that's, I would say I would like to compliment on this foundational stage. Whether we would be able to update our Anganwadi systems, whether we would be able to give teacher training, the emphasis it requires. It talks about the fact that we would want to have the best people in teaching. In India, teaching is seen to be a hobby, right? Either to be a hobby or either somebody who's too much of an expert. So you'll have two types of teachers. If you go to an IIM, if you go to an ISB, you go to an IIT, you meet a professor who's at a level which is very, very high. On the other hand, if you go to a school, obviously that teacher might be more interested in moving, making some sweater for her kids. So that's I think the gap, the divide, I would say. So in a significant shift from the 1986 policy, which posed for a 10+2 structure of education, the new policy pitches for 5+3+4. right? So 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4. So ages group is 3 to 8 foundational, then 8 to 11 preparatory, 11 to 14 middle, and 14 to 18. It talks about what they want to teach in each of these periods. If you like to go in detail, that I think if you're a school teacher listening to it, you should go through it. This brings early childhood education under the ambit of formal schooling. Now, midday meal program, I would say the most I think a lot of people have complimented. The Hindu editorial has also complimented. It says the midday meal program will be extended to preschool children, and the national education policy says that under class 5th, should be taught in the mother tongue. So again, this can be criticized and has been criticized in one of the articles by one of the professors at IIT Madras. So how would you implement this? Remember, it's a concurrent subject. Remember in the previous case, the 3-language formula, which was prescribed in 1968, was not, expected, to be respected by the South Indian states. Tamil Nadu declined that, right? So that's another thing. The other thing is there's going to be shortage of funds. Remember, it's a concurrently done thing. Education is both the center and the state. The government plans to set up subject-wise committees for members from relative ministries in both state and central level to develop implementation plan for this. It will be done by the HRD ministry, the NCRTs, the CBSE, etc., NTA, etc. And they will have a yearly joint review of progress and target set. So that's going to be the idea. Now, what does this emphasis on mother tongue and regional language mean for English medium schools? The emphasis obviously is not new. Most common schools are doing it. For private schools, it's being necessary, and likely they would like to change their medium of instruction. So what will happen? Again, a further gap between private and public schools, right? Education is a concurrent subject, right? So the policy states you will be taught in a mother tongue or regional language wherever possible. But I'm sure, the competitive mind of the Indian parent will never allow that to happen. They would want their children to learn in English. So what about transferable jobs or children of multilingual parents? It doesn't talk about that. It says teacher will be encouraged to use a bilingual approach. So, like maybe in our videos, we do a little bit of Hindi, a little bit of Punjabi, etc., etc. So including bilingual teaching learning materials, students who have home language is different from the medium instruction. So we have this problem even at higher education. If there's a person who comes to France to study in India, normally the problem, they are not good at that English. So what does the government do when it plans to open to foreign players? The thing is that previously also in 2010, I remember 11, they wanted to push bills for best universities to come to India and open colleges, but they had shown no interest in entering the Indian market. They never found it lucrative enough. Participation of foreign universities in India is limited to them entering into collaborative training programs, sharing faculty, and offering distance education. 650 education providers have such thing, right? The document says that universities among the top 100 will be able to set up campuses in India, but it doesn't define what is this top 100. How do you select it, right? But in previously you have the QS World University Rankings. Maybe they'll use that. Now, how will the 4-year multidisciplinary bachelor program work? This which is interesting because remember 6 years ago, Delhi University was forced to scrap the 4-year undergraduate program at the incumbent government behest, and under the 4-year program proposed in UNEP, you can exit. So 1 year after certificate, 2 year after diploma, 3 year after bachelor. So they're saying if you want to study more, we'll allow, but if you don't want to, you can leave in between. So 4-year bachelor program includes a certain amount of research work, and a student will get deeper knowledge in a subject he or she majors in. And after 4 years, a bachelor student will be able to enter a research degree program directly, depending on whether he or she programmed well or something like that. Okay. So V.S. Chauhan, UGC chairman, says that after 4 years, you can go for a PhD. So what impact will happen of the MPhil program? So Mr. Chauhan talks about the fact in a normal course, after master's degree, you can register for a PhD. This is the current practice in most of the world. MPhil was a middle research degree between a master's and a PhD. Those who have entered MPhil more often have not ended a study, with the PhD. So MPhil have been phased out that you'll have a PhD program. So the question is, will the focus on multiple discipline not dilute the character? So this is the debate. Okay, IIT Madras IIT Bombay, IIT Kharagpur, IIT Delhi, they have other programs. Definitely they do have, right? But remember, it's too large what you're trying to do. Is it just going to be a formality? In public administration, we have this concept of Riggs formalism. That okay, हम करेंगे multidisciplinary, but चलेगा वही जो पहले चल रहा था. Will it be more of the same? And in developing countries, normally that happens. But on the other hand, the article talks about the fact that take the case of a civil engineer. Knowing how to build a dam is not going to solve a problem. He knows to know environmental and social impact of the building. And many engineers are becoming entrepreneurs. Should they not know something about economics? A lot more factors go into related to engineering. But they don't realize that this is already taught in any engineering college. Economics is taught. Environmental, social impacts are taught. Maybe much more than they would ever imagine, right? They're underestimating what engineering colleges teach these days. Okay, so this was the first article. Let's look at the first, criticism or first analysis, and this is by Bhaskar Ramamurthy. He's the director of IIT Madras. It says it's an education policy that is sweeping in its vision. Okay, it talks about it's an important step in India's transition from deprivation to development. So this can be something you can use in your answers in UPSC as well. Right, this can be a good start to an answer that this national education policy is an important step towards India's transition from deprivation to development. So that would be something I would like to start. So it says it is based on 2 committee reports, extensive nationwide consultations. It is sweeping its vision. It addresses the entire gamut from preschool to doctoral, from professional to vocational training. It acknowledges the 21st century need for mobility, flexibility, alternate pathways to learning, and self-actualization. It says it talks about the unprecedented challenges that is there, that how to provide quality education to children and the youth. There's a lack of resources and capacity, right? So, there is dozen of mother languages, a linked language, which is obviously is the global language of choice, but it's alien to most. There's a persistent mismatch between knowledge and the skill imparted and the jobs available. So these have been our challenges which have, bedeviled our efforts, right, since independence. Right. So if you think about him coming from IIT Madras, you'll talk about majority of the people who are not in computer science doing computer science jobs or doing data analytics jobs, etc. Okay, most of them, despite the fact they would have studied chemical or civil engineering. Right. So there's a mismatch even at IITs. So obviously he talks about how obviously this breaks free, right? As I talked about this most important area, that 85% of the child's cumulative development is prior age 6. So the fact that Anganwadi preschool and Bal Vatikas are being focused in this is a wonderful idea. It talks about the mother tongue and the criticism, right? We are up against the strong desire of parents today. When we say that we want to teach a child in his mother tongue till class 5, there is a strong desire. They want to give their children a head start by exposing them to English from day one, right? So that is there. And maybe we should recognize that, between ages of 3 to 8, languages child play and blend the mother tongue and English in the first 5 years of school. So this is what he's saying. He says multilingual felicity could become the USP of Indian educated. Now, I feel this is a fact, and this is the need of the hour. I think this policy needs to be changed in this direction. I think I will try to talk to the people in the HRD. Now, breaking of the straitjackets. This is the next thing they talk about. It says that another key aspect is that arts, commerce, science in high school, etc. And there's a laudable goal of introducing vocational courses with internship, that every person should have some kind of vocation by the time she passes out. Now, the question is how this will be there. Remember, parents want their children to study science. The reason is they want them to be employable, etc. So how exactly you will realize this? There's a penchant of overzealous parents to stream the children to professions at the earliest. There is blue collarization of vocations in our society, and this is also a hurdle to be overcome. Right. So again, there the policy talks about 100% gross enrollment ratio in school by 2030. Now, remember, as I said, I've looked into ODF. Right. If you look at that, one of the other schemes of the government, which supposedly is lauded, everybody knows how well it has been implemented. whether how big a failure it is on the ground, maybe, right? So 100% of GER, you'll get students to the class through some kind of bribe or something, like some midday meal or something. But whether it will really make them study well, or whether you will be able to provide the education quality level, that is something which I think is debatable. Now, the next obviously is the philosophy of flexibility. Obviously, NEP 2020 proposes the multidisciplinary higher education with portable credits, multiple exits with certificates, etc. So obviously, wonderful. We talked about this. It says that ambitious GER of 50% is envisaged, and obviously that would be wonderful. Right. There's huge potential of online pedagogy, and it talks about learning methodologies by attaining GER target is recognized and sought to be tapped extensively. So obviously, it talks that yes, this flexibility is good and will be useful. What about regulation? Remember, regulatory cholesterol is the bane of governance in India. Poor outcomes. Whenever we have tried to regulate, we have regulated poorly. Right, we have too much politics. NEP makes bold prescription to free our schools from this. Talks about path of self-assessment and voluntary declaration, but there are too many issues in schools, right, for this to actually happen. Is it just to make it easy to privatize? Is it because all the politicians own schools? Right, that is debatable. In a country still beset by huge inequality and challenges faced by the disadvantaged and the disabled, it focuses on this. So obviously, so 5-star for this, I would say. The long neglected ancient languages and Indian knowledge system are also identified. So again, wonderful there as well. So all this require enormous resources. We're saying that we're having a public spending. It's a tall order. We have current tax to GDP ratio is poor. If I look at what kind of tax revenues we've got, it's only 8% the first quarter. Not going to happen soon. And I think the main focus right now is healthcare, not education in some ways. Then there's national security, China, and other key sectors. So whether you will ever reach 6%, I debate. Now, let's look at the most critical article maybe today, and this is by Kumkum Roy, and she says the national education policy is an ambitious and complex document, and she says it has been adopted in the midst of a pandemic which renders discussion and debate difficult. Kumkum Roy has written a lot of books for the NCERT, right, and she's at the Center of Historical Studies in JNU. So it says that one of the big points is that what are the implications of NEP for marginalized disciplinary spaces, autonomy, and constitutional values? It says that there's no mention of caste, except the scheduled caste maybe in the whole policy. It does not talk about the tribals as much. It has a disturbing reference to educational institution in tribal areas as ashramalayas, and this is envisaged in early childhood children education program. This is what 1.8 of the NEP, right? It says ECCE will be introduced in ashramalayas and tribal dominated areas in all formats of alternate schooling in phased manner. Okay, so that's one thing. So the marginalized, have they been talked about? Maybe a bit, I would say, right? There is some talk of them, of special kids, etc. Right? Definitely that's there. Obviously, there's experimental learning, concept of art integration, sport integration, which is wonderful, right? On the other hand, but whether they have actually looked into the marginalized people, maybe a separate pamphlet has to be attached to this. Then, what about inclusion and equity in higher education? So it says that there are sectional documents. So there's NEP 14.4. There are steps which are supposed to be taken of the SEDZ, right? Socially economic backward people. So it says that there's no time frame which has been mentioned. So there have been points like this. So enhance gender balance, enhance access, develop high quality HEs that teach in Indian and local language bilingually, provide more financial institutions. But I would say each of them would require a separate scheme. So when is that happening, etc., etc.? What are the details of the scheme? Maybe is it just a way of increasing privatization, Okay. Now, very interestingly, the document visualizes increased benign privatization of education and distinguishes this from commercialization. Obviously, the multidisciplinarity, Kumkum Roy says that, there's a lot of multidisciplinarity which has been talked about. But all those multidisciplinarity seems to be for a job. It doesn't talk about the basis of our democracy. It doesn't talk about women's studies, gender studies. So the gender violence will continue because students will not be taught about that. So that should be taught from school. Cultural studies, to appreciate the culture of other people. Media studies, Dalit studies, the studies of discrimination and exclusion. So upper class people in India don't think there is any discrimination in India. So that is because that's never taught in school, right? That is not explained in school. So environmental studies, development studies, so all those things have to be not talked about. So that's something which she talks about. She says, obviously, selection of vocational subjects in middle school is described as a fun choice, but it will be decided by states and local communities and as mapped by local skill needs. So again, this, the proof of the pudding is in eating it. And so that's the basic idea. Then it says HEIs will be run by a board of governors. Again, centralization is envisaged to regulate in a light but tight facilitative manner. The few important matters: financial probity, good governance, full offline and online public disclosure of finance procedures, faculty, staff, courses, education outcomes will be effectively regulated, right? And while leaving the rest to the judgment of the HEIs. What are these others? Obviously, right. While we've been hearing a great deal about the benefits of Atmanirbhar, we have this concept of foreign universities being better than us. It talks about multidisciplinary education research universities. So this is just like a copy of Ivy Leagues. And would we like to actually get that type of education here? I would not agree with it. Right, it has its own use, but definitely you will realize that the education in the US is not what is required maybe in India. Several, obviously, universities have formulated democratic mechanisms. They implement, they discuss, right, whether these vibrant institutions will be jettisoned, and now the top-down mechanism of administration will be there, and will that happen? So the other thing is. It talks about patriotism, which sacrifice, non-violence, truth, etc. Right? So all these things: tolerance, mercy, sympathy, helpfulness, cleanliness, courtesy, integrity, pluralism, responsibility, etc., etc. But there is no mention of fundamental rights. There is mention of fundamental duties, but no rights. So the question is whether, the rights are supposed to be forgotten. But maybe you're being a little more critical. Maybe they just missed it. Finally, this is the editorial from the Hindu. So a long road, it says the center will have to convince states that the national education policy benefits all. It says that in a federal system, educational reforms can only be implemented from the state, and the state has this enormous task of consensus making. Right? Yes, the NEP has this interesting phenomena that it wants to focus on literacy and numeracy outcomes. Right? It is true that the primary schools have shocking results in the PISA. Right? Dropout levels in middle and secondary school are significant. Higher education system has failed to meet the aspiration of multidisciplinary programs and so on. So that is there, right? So it talks about the NEP, obviously, the early childhood education in class 3, offering school board exams twice a year to help performance, going away from rote learning, raising mathematical skills for everyone, right? And all those things. The progress on these crucially depends whether you'll get the money. So it does talk about the same thing. I said, show me the money. Right? You can make all the policies in the world, but without the capital to back it, it's not going to happen. Further, there's too much prescription in places where you would need a description in policy making. The long-held view, obviously, is in a diverse country, whereas mobility is high. You should have option to study in a language which enable the transfer nationally. So English has performed this role. Whether this mother tongue will be useful or not, that's debatable. So in the end, there are some good elements to NEP, which will generate little friction, and the states will like it. But if there is adequate resourcing, there is a provision of a energy-filled breakfast. And this is in addition to the nutritious midday meal, right? So this is in addition to the nutritious midday meal. This will help children achieve better learning outcomes. There's creation of inclusion funds to help socially and educationally disadvantaged children to pursue education is another. Whereas policy figures fails is on the universalization of access in both school and higher education. Right to education needs to specify measures to succeed. There is fee regulation in some states. Regulatory process needs to rein some profiteering in the form of unaccounted donations. The idea of a National Higher Education Regulatory Council as a apex organization is bound to be resented by states. Similarly, a national body of aptitude tests would have to convince the states of its merit. So among the many imperatives, the deadline to achieve universal literacy and numeracy by 2025 should be a goal which should crucially determine progress at higher levels. So as I said that in the beginning itself, this is a wonderful step. But universal literacy and numeracy by 2025 in a country where class 5 people cannot read class 2 books is a long haul. And I think right, let's give our best wishes to the teachers of this country who will be implementing this. Thank you for listening. Right, if you have any questions, do ask. We will be posting a few answers on this on our Telegram group. Do join it. Thank you so much.